Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 37 of the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast. Today, we have Mr. Johannes Richter, who is a principal VFX artist at Remedy Entertainment. He has worked on projects in games and film, including Control, Detective Pikachu, and Avengers: The Infinity War. Johannes has over 12 years of experience working as a technical director, teacher, and FX artist in the world of computer graphics. With that said, let's dive in.
Welcome to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, the place to hear from some of the video game industry's most seasoned artists and up your game. Listen in on how you can learn and grow as a VFX artist, discover your own wizard, and network with hundreds of other talented magicians in the real-time visual effects community. Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Hey, Johannes. How you doing today, man?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Now, you're in Finland, so I think it's around 10 p.m. on a Sunday over there.
Yes, it is.
Can you see outside your window? You know what the weather's like?
Just gotten dark, and it was a pristine blue sky, sunny day today. Well, we think it's warm, but it was like, 12 to 15 degrees Celsius.
Nice. It is a beautiful day here in Dallas. In fact, I actually went for a walk this morning just to get some fresh air and warm up with some delicious coffee. Johannes, I want to jump into all of the awesome work that you've been doing. I know you have amazing credits in film, and recently you finished up a awesome video game called Control with a new expansion on top of that, or a DLC piece. But I want to jump back to your origin story. How did you get started in visual effects?
We got to go back. Oh, wait, how far do you want to go back? I was, I would say, maybe 10 years old when I first saw a computer in action, which was an Amiga 500 at a friend of mine. And I think from that point on, I was quite fascinated with that stuff. At some point, I finally convinced my parents to have one on my own. After a while of gaming, it got boring to this game, and I started, I typed up code from a Amiga Basic handbook, literally letter by letter, not really knowing what I was doing. And then, you start getting into game fiddly bits, making little sprites move across screen, something not noteworthy in terms of game development, but it was sort of quite entertaining and quite a thrill back then. And that was the time before like internet was a thing. So it was really, you get stuff from books, or friends give you like a floppy disk with some text files on it that tell you how to do stuff. And that was pretty cool. And let's jump forward a bit. I sort of, did my A-levels, and then I decided to make computers a thing. So I did computer science and multimedia studies at Dresden University of Technology for quite a few years. And I went into computer graphics because that's kind of what I found most awesome. I was sort of kind of into the whole tech stuff, programming, algorithms and all that, but I kind of needed to look cool at the end. So if I was a bit like, databases were only somewhat interesting, because in the end, the outcome wasn't as, I don't know if it's prestigious or appealing or great, but somehow I wanted to have something to show for, literally. Part of those studies, I spent a year in Australia then and did some film studies and cinema studies. I did some script writing and started getting into 3D stuff. Back in Germany, we had a Maya interest group doing 3D stuff, like literally trying to make little short films. And it was all that Maya 3, I think, back then, super old stuff. And and that sort of became this thing that I was really keen on, that computer stuff. And it's not that we're talking 2000, maybe when I'm back from Australia, 2005, maybe. It's not that there was like a massively inviting industry, just scavenging for people in terms of like games and 3D stuff in games. And, I dabbled a little bit in the demo scene. I made stuff that never saw the light of day anyway. So I never really had the connections inside Germany to really get into this whole game dev stuff. And I ended up becoming a really boring programmer for a company in the town I studied in. And that was so terrible that I did two things. I started drinking coffee in week 1, because coffee drinking meant I didn't have to be at my desk because it wasn't really thrilling. And then I signed up for university again to go to Film Academy in Germany, quite a known film school that has a big animation department that are very, very good as an institution. Well, their principle is lock a bunch of really enthusiastic students into a building full of toys and wait a couple of years and see what they make. And that's quite a successful thing. And from that, it went away from games into film. I did start doing Houdini. 2007, I was that. And I embraced sort of the technical direction side of things. Well, it's called technical director, but it's sort of just a role description. It's nothing directing about this. So it's like rigging and stuff and Houdini and those kind of things. Lots of short film projects. And from there, I got a summer job at Framestore in London pretty straight away. What was that? That was Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows. I had the awesome opportunity to meet like some really amazing people I got to work with later on, like, again, for quite a long time. And that sort of kickstarted it all. I finished my degree and then I worked in Australia for a while on Sucker Punch, Zack Snyder's visual medley of pop culture, whatever you might think of the film. But it was fun to work there. And it was in Sydney, Australia. It was like, yeah, beach and stuff. So that was kind of nice. Yeah. And then I came back and London worked for The Mill for a while, which is really quite a known production house that does commercials, a lot of commercials. Commercials was like, not so my thing. And then I returned back to Framestore and I had the chance to work on Gravity, which was amazing. Really, really great to work with so many so talented people. And then I just stuck to Framestore. Lots of people do the jumping around a lot. And somehow I managed to just hold on to this place and grow in the role until 2000, I think it was 18, end of 18 or something, or early in 19, I decided to move out of the UK for reasons. And also I was thinking, well, if I move in country, I might as well also try something that always was close to my heart. I never stopped making games on the side, like little really shitty apps, like nothing fancy, but to see like, hey, what can I do in games? Also looking at what the industry is going through or what happens with VFX and film, but also where games are going and how those things seem to converge at some kind of hot point. And I felt like, okay, let me be ahead of the curve and sort of did this. And I got this great opportunity to move to Helsinki and work with Remedy. Yeah, work for Remedy at Remedy, where I'm now. And that's sort of the short version of my journey, I would say.
Rock on, man. That is an incredible journey. Not only have you been able to travel all around the world and experience all these amazing cultures and countries, but you've been able to work on a variety of different projects in different types of studios. I'm curious, of all the different projects that you've been able to work on, which one was your favorite and why?
That comes up a lot as a question. I've answered this as spontaneously as I can, and I would literally say Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Why? Well, because it's Guardians of the Galaxy 2. James Gunn is a pretty great director, and it was maybe the second installment of something that has already been tried, and everyone's like, yeah, that's going to be great. From the get-go, you know you're having something you're involved with that is really creative and fun, and sort of it doesn't take itself so serious. We worked on the opening sequence, the baby Groot dancing, shit exploding behind him, kind of first 10 minutes of the film. And that was just really great. And I had some amazing team. It was 25 people in the effects team at Framestore for this. Yeah, we did the prison escape stuff. We did the spaceship battle in the beginning, and we did the baby Groot dance. Yeah, and that was just fun. It was really great. And also I got to work with like some of the most creative and talented people I've had the chance to work with in my life. So, and that was really good. I was quite proud of that. And I think it wasn't the first. So it was a few projects down from leading an effects team, like the blow up people as part of the VFX production that we did at Framestore. So that was definitely one. And then if I think longer about it, I would say Gravity. And we got the Oscar for that. We got the VES for that. And that was just absolutely great to have such a chance to be involved in a project that sort of could achieve what it achieved. So that was really good.
I know that visual effects in film has a different pipeline than it does in video games. So I'm just curious really quickly, within Guardians of the Galaxy experience, what part of the actual effects did you do? Were you the compositor? Were you the rigger? Were you the supervisor? Like, how did you fit into that project?
Literally effects. I sometimes have to explain it even to myself. It's in film you have VFX. Well, everything's VFX, right? So the visual side of it. So you have the vendors doing all the compositing and modeling and rigging and stuff, and then there is an effects part of this, which is I usually say we're animating everything that doesn't have a face: fire and water and collapsing buildings and exploding whatever things. But sometimes also more weird thing. I did all the bats and Dracula Untold because swarming stuff and so particles and anything. It's actually, in terms of terminology, quite relatable to what happens in games.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so it's mainly that part. And I was, for Guardians of the Galaxy, I was leading the effects team. So I do quite a few things myself, but also making sure that everyone else does things. So we do reviews, like sort of daily sessions with the team that then filters into the daily sessions with the art director, the creative director of the project, or VFX supervisor in the film terms. Yeah, you just make sure that everything sort of works tech-wise, looks good, and delivers on time. No pressure.
Being here at the forefront of the visual effects industry, I'm sure you have seen some changes over the years. I'm curious, what do you feel like are some of the trends going on here in 2021?
Yeah, there's some massive changes going on. Some of them you could have seen coming miles away, and others are sort of came very sudden, and everyone sort of hoped for it. Especially, with COVID. Maybe I started that end. Is I remember at the early days when we had a 4-digit code to enter to leave the office floor to go to the bathroom, because everything had to be so locked tight and secret, and for the studios wanting to be so secure to make sure nothing leaks. So working from home was never as like, yeah, totally, I'm going to broadcast my Iron Man shots into my living room or something. But suddenly all that's possible, because in the end there are contracts, and I think no one in the industry is really not aware of what happens when something leaks. Suddenly is this, and that allows nomad existence that a lot of VFX artists had. I think it's even the same in games. You move on from studio to studio because you move where the studios are. So I have lots of my friends moving to Montreal when the tax breaks in Canada just got awesome and all the studios opened shop there. Same for games, actually. I mean, Montreal is full of studios on both sides of the aisle, really. Or Vancouver, or Australia, or Wellington. And they travel sometimes with their families across continents from fixed term job to fixed term job. And all of a sudden, remote work is possible. And there are friends in film that now suddenly can work from home in India, in London, because of COVID. As bad as the situation was, but it sort of has accelerated a certain natural globalization where I think like, well, we could always do internet and stuff. It's not like a new invention, but suddenly people took a hold of that. So that I think from the personal, how do you work there? That's one thing. And then technical, we are moving out of everything's offline technology. I think that the pipelines that have been established since, I would say, the early or mid 90s, that is, you model a thing, you light a thing, and then you do a little preview render, you wait that half an hour, every pixel appears, and then you're like, okay, I'm happy. And then you render the 2K overnight or something. That I think is slowly phasing out for using tech that gives you much more immediate feedback. But you see all those pilot projects where like The Mandalorian has used Unreal for shots and stuff. And of course, because the technology has advanced and it is so much more accessible and allows for so much better iteration, which fits quite wonderfully into the fact that the budgets are shrinking and the desires are growing. And that's the same in games and films. I will repeat that a lot. I don't even think there is much of a difference between those two developments. There's maybe a delay that games is just 10 years after film in terms of where they are on the timeline. But the effects now is just industry. It's stuff is getting produced. The processes have been somewhat worked through, and the struggle of having to deliver something that at the end it looks great and awesome, although at the beginning no one knows how it's actually going to look like. Well, that also sounds familiar from games. So, but yeah, all the real-time tech, I think that is the biggest, the hottest stuff that's really tech-wise going on the film VFX side. And maybe cross-pollinating over into games as well, because there are lots of filmic principles and workflows and terminology and maybe even job roles that are becoming thing in games, where before it was more like lots of generalist people that sort of not wing it all, they bring it all together. But my view is that it's going to become like film has become more specialized, more clear who's doing what the roles are, because also it's getting the quality targets are so high now that you can't, I just quickly on the side did the thing. You kind of need a full-time person that really does this for a living, like one specific aspect of it. I don't know. You don't quickly wing a facial rig. Like you don't do that just on the sly, or many other parts that might have been possible before. And maybe that's sad because it loses a little bit of the frontier garage band spirit in the wake of that. But the projects are getting massive. I mean, the budgets are way beyond what film costs these days when you look at like big blockbuster games and stuff. So
yeah, they're absolutely are. Are there any particular challenges that you feel VFX is facing right now in the real-time space, now that you've been working at Remedy Studios?
Well, there's always the challenge of like, how do you get it to run on the hardware it's supposed to run? I'm looking at the desire. We want to do something amazing and fresh and new. The speed of the change of the things that, now we're going next gen, and everyone went wild on the Unreal Nanite demo. And I was just thinking, who's going to model all that extra detail? And then how do we create that? How do we provide high quality content at this incredible volume? I mean, the big blockbuster games these days that are coming out, they have so many people working on that. And the conditions are not necessarily great. Like the working conditions are often described as pretty horrible, which I'm actually really thankful and happy that Remedy does not operate like that. We're actually really, really good in terms of
we call it no crunch. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you call it, there is crunch. It's a bit of it might not be like completely true to say there's never crunching, but it's not the expected. You don't want this. You don't ever want this. And of course, towards the end of a project, people will spend more time, but then you get the time back. It's like written down overtime, for example, and it's compensated. And it's never that bad. I mean, the stories you hear of people sleeping under the desks, I don't think that is a common thing you would ever see where I am now.
Bit of a philosophical question here. Your identity as a visual effects artist, what do you feel like our biggest contribution to our employers, to the world, to ourselves is as a VFX artist?
Yeah, that's a good one. What's my biggest contribution to the world? Sometimes you ask yourself that. I just went through some Ikigai questionnaire. I don't know if you know of Ikigai. Is the Japanese thing. It's like the purpose of your own existence. Now, obviously to make money, but also to further the world, like to further the people somehow. And I think, well, of course, it's entertainment, right? It is entertainment, and maybe it's some form of education as well, even if it's emotional education or giving people the joy of hanging out and doing cool stuff with their friends. But it is an entertainment job, and I think that's kind of how I see this. Yeah.
And let me spin that another way and ask, why would Remedy or any game company need to hire VFX artists?
Oh, specifically for VFX. Okay. Why would they hire them?
Like what makes our role so important in a company?
Very good. Yeah. Okay. Now I get you on the question. We are the glue, because people ask, so what do you do? As I say this, we animate everything that doesn't have a face or something. We are the ones that do the stuff that others can't, and that can be incredibly wide. And for Remedy, for example, it's particularly wide because we're sort of covering a lot that in other places is called tech art. We do shaders, but we also do procedure generation of things, plants, where you say, oh, isn't that environments? But we also do sometimes animation things, and sometimes things you don't even know what to call it because it's just weird stuff. Especially Remedy having this kind of style and the desire to, the new weird and all those things. You got to go to someone who does it. So that's what VFX is. Kind of a bit of the special ops. and maybe you do that for a while in VFX, and then you're like, oh, okay, now it can become something because we figured out what it is. Maybe now we can make it a workflow that someone else can own who might be inspired, be closer to this, I don't know, the environments or animation side stuff. I think we are the melting point between the artistic vision or the implementation of an artistic vision and the actual technical, how on earth are we going to do this kind of questions? I guess that's why we need to hire VFX people.
I love that you named us as the special ops unit. I almost imagine like if we were on a police force, they would call in like the big guns, which would be us. It's super cool how you describe it as the glue that brings everything together.
Yeah.
I want to ask about VFX work that you've done or you've overseen in other VFX artists. And out of the critiques and feedback that you give them, what is some of the common things that you see in work that takes it from good and then makes it even better?
Some people make fun of me because Johannes is always asking for reference. That's me. I was like, so what's your reference? Because when I look at something, I don't not only need to understand what I'm looking at, I need to understand what the thing that someone has made is supposed to be. Because only then if I can compare this is the desire and this is what someone has made, that I know if this is successful in that regard or not. Because what do I know what this is supposed to look like? And so I always ask for reference if it's possible. And of course, VFX doesn't always have reference when it goes magical or when it goes otherworldly, then you're often left alone. But I still feel often you can still find something. You say, well, I tried to match the timing or the snappiness of this or the flow and shape of this or the colors of something else and somehow bring it together. So reference is definitely one of the points. And I guess everyone answers that. Everyone with a bit more experience says, yeah, no, I need to know what I'm supposed to be looking at. So that would be probably the hottest question.
What did you wish you knew when starting out? If you could look back 12 years ago when you first started, what would your future self tell your younger self?
There isn't much. I think I see this whole journey. I guess I skipped a lot of beats in there. It's not, I haven't had the dream of like, I will be working in a games company. Actually, I did. 1995, I was so like into, I'm going to work at Lucasfilm and I'm going to make like adventure games because I played Monkey Island. Actually, it was never the immediate desire. I'm going to be doing VFX for film, because it was really, when did I start thinking about it? Early 2000s, maybe. There wasn't a school that just teaches you that. There wasn't a degree in something, and then you become, the roles in film weren't even settled yet, what that would be called, or in games, I think, it was much more generalized. So I never really had this clear, this is where I want to be. And I feel it's a mosaic. Every time there's something little coming, adding to it. So, I did some coding, I don't know, sometime in the 90s that really you do very low level assembler inline stuff in Turbo Pascal to do some spinning cubes and texture mapping and stuff. And then oddly these days, I'm like, oh man, all that stuff is so useful that I did this. And then I sort of have this somewhere in my head. But back then I would have never thought that would become a job. So what would I tell myself is like, it's going to be fine. Keep learning, keep doing what you're interested in, and sort of embrace what you enjoy, and try to figure it out. Like if there's something that I don't know, like really go in and figure it out and try to do it yourself and understand it to the point that you then can, build on top of that really easily. And it's a really boring, it's going to be okay, I guess, keep going. That's probably what I would tell myself.
Everybody has their own way of learning new tools and learning new techniques and learning visual effects. What is your learning style? How do you learn?
By doing, that's definitely by doing, and then by doing something meaningful. I find it difficult to learn something without a goal. So when I'm saying I do little pretty games on the side, that's always also a vehicle to learn tech, to learn, I don't know, how does Unity work? How does Unreal work? Or how do different aspects in Houdini? I just did a bit of rigging in Houdini, which I've never done before because I kind of needed to rig something. But it has to have a goal or a purpose that is a meaningful outcome. Just to go like, oh, I just follow a random tutorial I find on YouTube. You do that, but then you really just know which buttons to click in which order to get to the outcome of the tutorial. You haven't actually made something that sort of lets it sink in a bit more. So I try to tie it all to something practical, and I try to understand the fundamentals of it, because like, what's the math? Like literally and I do, if you want to, I can go a little bit in detail. I usually use Houdini because I find this is a fantastic tool because you can emulate the whole world with it, including a GPU, a rendering pipeline. And then I code stuff in Vex algorithms, and I did a fluid solver. You can write it in Vex. You don't have to do anything else. It's like you can translate it to GLS later on if you want. It's somewhat relatable, but it allows you to stop at any point and look at everything that's happening. It's a great debug tool. So I often do that. Hack it together as a bunch of nodes in Houdini. Once you've done this, you're pretty solid with all the random questions and problems that can occur when you have to learn something. You will run into all these issues, and then sort of you figure it out, and then it gives you quite a lot of confidence being able to take what you just learned and then sort of start breaking it and sort of tweaking it in a way that wasn't intended, and then you can come up with new things.
You said something really important, I think, there, and you said, I don't learn to just copy what the buttons or the parameters were that somebody did in a tutorial. I literally learn what the actual meaning behind those parameters are so I can create my own personal projects. And I think that's really powerful because so many people create portfolios using other people's tutorials as their basis, and they don't create anything original as a result.
Yeah, sadly so. I've been in many sort of those student booths and conferences and stuff. And then you get those incredibly talented and enthusiastic students come to me and show me their reel. And then it's always the same animation mentor class that you can do, which is a great class, but it's always the same guy lifting a box animation. And I always wonder why is it, make it a banana? Don't make it a box. You don't have to depart entirely, but just give it something that is you from it, because then you can grow against it. And it's not just the execution that you're demonstrating, but also that you sort of lived it and molded it into something that is your own. So yeah, I can fully relate to that. And it's true with so many things. It sounds really odd, but I'm really, really grateful that I studied really boring computer science, which isn't boring actually, but I'm easily excitable. I can go to a problem and look at the problem and say, oh, well, that's a bit of a problem. And then I take a step back and look at the fundamental fundamentals, maybe the math behind it or the coding behind it and how stuff is structured. And sometimes I wish stuff is more substantial. It sounds like I'm 100 years old and I'm looking back on my life, but I would wish it's more about the fundamentals and not about the thing that you can post on Instagram. So I've been teaching for a while a Houdini course with DDMA, and I always compare the outcome of the stuff that my students are doing to the real cool stuff that the other students are doing. They do like destruction classes and shit's on fire and it's all great. And I'm like, cool, we make a little funny symmetrical pattern out of math. Yay, sort of. But I feel what students learn is to help themselves later on by having understood what's actually happening underneath. While you can set a building on fire or you can do some other crazy, nice Instagrammable stuff, but then you still don't know what the fire actually is underneath, like in terms of what is actually happening there, what math is actually happening. And I don't want to dump so much bad on it. I think those courses have all their justification, but you should start at the basics always, because then you have the confidence and the knowledge to really be safe where you are. You don't have to fear, oh God, if something breaks, I would have no idea how to fix this. I think that's a really big principle of like a lot of what I do and what I teach.
Are there any role models, visual effects artists, or anywhere else in the world, alive or dead, that have inspired and influenced you in your own career?
Yeah. So I've since you gave me those questions before, I thought about this. What do I say that is doing justice to all the people that I've worked with? I had a fantastic VFX supervisor at Framestore. His name is Jonathan Faulkner. And he's I think he was sort of my first boss in that kind of role on Sherlock Holmes. And we worked together on Guardians and later on the Pokemon movie as well, which was for me just great to see how sort of assertion of creative control can look like, how someone can be incredibly direct and incredibly clear in giving guidance on what something is supposed to be, even if it's incredibly hard. And sometimes it takes a couple of runs to even hone in on something. The accuracy and the specific way how a vision was sort of built. I mean, you could show him something, I don't know, in March, and then you would wait 3 months and show the same thing again, and he would say, I've seen this before. Why isn't it different? Like sort of he had a really great mind, and I really learned a lot from working with him. I don't want to necessarily put him on a pedestal, but I know was really shaping my also my understanding for my own existence, because lots of people are saying, oh, you work on blockbuster movies, Avengers or something. Isn't that really boring? Because it's just franchise stuff. And it's like, and it's very clear, you get like concept art and you get like a cinematic or something, and you know exactly what you need to be doing. Isn't that like coloring in? And I always found like I was so glad for every guideline I could get, because coloring in can be an incredibly demanding, challenging and creative job, because just because someone says, and then the starship explodes, there's a lot of pixels that need a color, and how to get to have all those pixels to have the right color that it looks great is actually still a crazy challenge, even if someone has given you quite a tight boundary creatively. And I've really gained a lot of appreciation for feeling like an artist, even if the art direction is so strong. So it doesn't always have to be just my idea. I think it is a lot about the craftiness of it in there. So I put him right up there. But so many other people I got to work with in film. Mainly in film. I haven't been in games long enough to really, I don't know, have gathered that impression, but anyone really who dares to step out there and try to do something creatively challenging, and then using technology to bring something to life, to make something feel in a game, to make something feel in a way that people really can respond and you feel at home. You sort of, I don't know, you can express frustration, or you can express relief, and you can just entertainment, make people laugh or be in awe. And I find this, everyone who dares to go on that journey that deserves credit in this. And I've always aspired that in anyone I worked with.
So let's talk about one of the games you've worked on. Control is often praised for its visual effects works. And I know many artists in the community are infatuated with the tech behind the aesthetics. I know you gave a talk through SideFX last week, sharing your knowledge on creating reactive environments, as well as another great talk on procedural destruction, with some other amazing talks. I was wondering if you could share your experience working on Control. What are some of the big key challenges that you've been facing during your time on the project? And of all the accomplishments you did, what do you consider your biggest win?
Okay. I joined Control really late in production. I think I started early in the year and the game came out in summer. So I had like half a year of time to really work on it. And I joined the VFX team, and sort of that is the polishing hot phase where everything kind of comes together and where stuff just kind of needs to work. And I was really fortunate to come in at that point because I could really still make a difference. I could really help doing things that were sort of intended, but really lacked the resources to actually execute out. So yeah, and Destruction, of course, coming from a very strong Houdini background, I could definitely help with that and help making this all sort of travel across the finish line. God, there were many questions in there, but I can talk about what I did on it. Yes, so I was involved in Destruction work, some other game mechanics works, so the player gating in combat and stuff that makes those barriers. I was involved in those. There were decals, texture generation, stuff like that. Really, I wouldn't say, I can't credit myself to really having stemmed that thing significantly. Matti Hämäläinen is the guy who did the Destruction system, who really built the big part of it. And I helped sort of make sure that it in the end sort of was also applicable to the astral plane parts, all the breaking marble rocks stuff in there. And that there's starting to organize that our Houdini pipeline is actually built in a way that we can really scale and all those things. So that was really my contribution. And I'm really happy that I got a chance to come in so hot from a guy who's basically in film. And a lot of people always say that, oh, well, in film you do this, but in games it's different. I found from the beginning, it's a very, very relatable, very similar workflow, because the outcome in the end is a visual outcome. And even if interactive has another dimension to it, quite literally. I missed the second half of your question. Sorry.
Well, talk to me about that. Like transitioning from film to games, you obviously have a different perspective on how things are done from one medium. Well, it's the same medium, the visual medium, but from one pipeline to the other. And you just mentioned that there's a interactive element to video game visual effects. What does that mean? And what's that dynamic? And how does it differ from film, and what makes it so special and so challenging?
Yeah, okay. Film is 100% deterministic, because essentially it is a series of images, 2D images. So it's just a lot of pixels that have a color. That's film. And once you have it, you have it. It's fully replicable. It's like this is what the film is, and every pixel of the film is defined. Whereas in a game, you don't really have that, because, well, you don't even have control. Like in Control, you don't have control of the camera. You don't know where the player is looking. You don't know what they're going to be doing. And you're working on a live piece of software, which we also kind of did in film. I mean, there was lots of software development going on. We had a custom fluid solvers and fire solvers and stuff, and lots of tech that goes into making the pixels. But at that point, you make the pixel, and then that's what it is. You take, save the file, and that's what you have. In games, it's a live piece of software. So just because something did work yesterday doesn't mean it works tomorrow. Or just because it looks fantastic, but the player chooses to look the other way. And then it's about perception. Whereas in film, it's, well, what you see is what you get. In games, it's all about how does it feel to the player? And when you look at the game sphere out there, like the games that are out there, funny enough, we're running a couple of sessions within our department these days, looking at games that are out there and what makes them work or not work. And then we sort of debate that a little bit. And you realize sometimes stuff looks absolutely god awful. And you have never noticed until you freeze the frame and really realize that what it is, because it always felt so great. So there's something more to the picture than the picture. There's also the feeling aspect and the, of course, non-linearity of things. Stuff can happen out of order. Stuff can happen in different lighting conditions. If you look at open world and full dynamic weather and all that. I mean, there are so many problems and questions that you don't actually know what the final thing will be like in the experience of the player. And that is clearly different. And I find that it's no longer just, well, I look at it and it looks great. This is no longer the bar. The bar is actually, it's perceived like something great, which doesn't necessarily mean it looks great. It just sort of feels right. And I read like Steve Swink, the whole game feels stuff and things that are related to that. And you can try to theorize about it, but sometimes it's really, I don't think I really have a good grasp yet on what does make it feel good. It's still a thing that we all debate all the time. It's like, what is the actual, is it like, I don't know, is it a blur? Is it a shake? Is it a rumble? Is it the camera doing something? Is it the colors? And it's some dance of all those different aspects that makes a game image or a game moment successful. Whereas in film, well, of course there's the audio, but it's much tighter. It's much tighter knit. And so there isn't that much ambiguity in when you made a thing.
When you're in your game studio and you're working on your visual effects, I imagine that you do a lot of playtesting of your effects almost on a weekly basis to see what it looks like in the game world.
You do this all the time yourself, because you build it in the game. You basically test it by having it as part of the game, and you run and shoot, or you in Control, you take the chair and throw it against the wall. And then that's just for oneself. That's with a team. And then everyone on the team for the entire game always plays the game, like all the time. Like, you always at least have to jump somewhere into the game, and then you run around a bit to the spot that you kind of want to try something out. And on that way, you've already tested everyone else's work somewhat. And of course, then there's QA. Like, there are those angels of people that really hammer it to make sure it's as tight and as solid as it only can be, which is an incredibly hard and unforgiving and so often not mentioned enough job. And even if it's these days outsourced into early access, right? Often. But I think QA does the brunt of that.
I think it's interesting you mentioned QAs as the angels. I'm curious, do you think somebody who wants to get into visual effects and they're just trying to get their first job in the games industry, do you see QA as a viable career path to start in a game company and then work your way into a visual effects position? Or do you think that's counterintuitive?
It sounds like the classic how someone started, right? I can only speak from my angle. And what do I know about games, right? I feel it might have been that. I don't think it fully carries unless from the QA position, you then move into like a trainee role into some 3D department. If QA just means, well, you have a foot in the door and you know some people to then get a trainee position, or you are pre-skilled in something. You already have skills that are applicable, because QA itself doesn't necessarily give you the craft skills to do something in a game pipeline. It gives you a good attitude, an eye for detail. It tests you for how determined you are, because it is a very, very hard job, very repetitive. But you got to be diligent. So it maybe tests some of your abilities and skills, but it doesn't test your craft. So I think, and we have something similar in film. People always say, well, rotoscoping, when you do the masks painting or the tracking, like the camera tracking, that's usually the entry positions in on the film side. But just because you're a good tracker doesn't mean you can do simulations, right? So I think, and the older the industries grow, the deeper the pillars kind of become, the more away we move from generalists. I think the more it's better to be educated specifically in a thing that you want to do. Or you use QA, you come in, you get this job, and then you somehow start learning as a trainee in one of the professions because you know the people. That is definitely something. But I always think it's absolutely worth to have learned something. It doesn't even have to be explicitly game design or game something modeling or create the skill. I don't know. Learn coding or learn sculpting, learn painting, learn whatever aspect you want to go into. Because just on the QA alone, I don't think that would fly.
I agree with that, Johannes. And I think oftentimes you have to put in the work. And sometimes it's going to be on your own time outside of work hours to be proficient enough. The benefit, though, there is that now you have a direct connection with your fellow coworkers to show them the work. Maybe at the end of the day on a Friday, you can be like, hey, I've been working on, a VFX reel in my spare time. Do you mind taking a look and giving me some notes? That could be a point where you can express interest, let them know that you'd love to help out on VFX. And I feel like that would be the big benefit.
And also, it is, maybe I'm contradicting myself a little bit. In these days today, like we are looking at a market that is entirely empty of skilled people, basically. Everyone there's so many that they have a job. Everyone who sort of has proven that they can work on a game already, they are already somewhere. And we are currently, Remedy is looking to hire quite a lot of roles. And there is just not many people out there that are skilled and like senior people that are actively looking for something. So if you're a more junior person, but you're already in contact with people, you might be lucky that it's the opportunity to say, well, I don't fully really know what I'm doing, but I can help with that. And then sometimes you'd say, okay, cool. Let's talk you through this. Let's mentor you through the problemscape that is sort of right there. And then you might find yourself quite similar to how I found myself a little bit in 2009 working on Sherlock Holmes in problems that felt quite a little bit too big for someone who's like, well, I'm working on a movie now, but you have the chance to step up and grow into this and do it. And that is right now probably a pretty good spot to be, because content is so hot. There's so much money out there for all the platforms wanting to provide new content in film, but also in games. Everyone has some form of Game Pass thing they want to fill with content, right? It's more like, where are we don't have enough creative people to really cater all. And so there is a big opportunity right now. If you know some people and they have some problems, that you might just kind of fit the role, and then you might have a chance to prove yourself. Yeah.
You have made that transition from film to games, and I know there are other filmmakers who have been in the VFX pipeline and they're maybe tired of doing the fixed contract work, moving from city to city, even though we're in COVID years, and they're looking for a little bit more security in their job prospects, maybe a family or whatnot. Can you talk to me a little bit about that transition for you? What ultimately ended up making your decision to move? How did the process go? And what's some advice you have for other people looking to make the transition as well?
There were a few reasons to move out of film work, VFX work, but and a lot of it was actually not really related to the job. Originated from the sad fact that one of the greatest cities in the world, which London used to be, kind of stopped being one of the greatest cities in the world after Brexit happened and after sort of the economic divide that happens in how I perceived it in the UK. And I was lucky to have a really fairly well-paid job in central London, but it just became too crowded, too hot, too hostile, hostile in like I can't even put my finger on it. It didn't feel like the free-spirited realm anymore, or the melting pot that it used to be. And of course, also I got older, and you start shifting your personal goals a little bit from, you had all the party you can have in London, and you had all the, and you could I could continue doing this for 5 years, or just or not, because those 5 years extra wouldn't give me any new experiences or memories. So you sort of at some point a bit over with the Moloch, the metropolis, and the hustle and bustle. And even sometimes I miss it now, but I'm actually really quite glad that I cycled past the sea to work. And maybe I've just gotten old or something terrible. So that was a big aspect of wanting to get out of there. And also things like healthcare or education and those things in Finland were, it happened to then be Finland, and that became then a no-brainer if you think about how well society is taking care of its members in Finland, for example, and how that reflects in the job and in how you're taking care there, and how sort of the workforce is kind of more important almost. It sounds really absurd from a business perspective, but it's the workforce is kind of more important than the stuff you're actually doing. When you really think about it, it's it's the people that make the thing. If the people aren't happy, the thing's not going to be happy or great. And I guess there's this spirit here. So all of that felt like all the stars are aligning. So from a personal perspective, I was looking for a change, been in film for almost 10 years, or pretty much 10 years. And with a heavy heart, but also quite excitedly, I was well, if I change now and I want to change industry or change jobs, should I just do the same job somewhere else? And then be somewhere else and in that job and think, what if I actually do games? Because I always thought about, maybe I should do games. And then this opportunity came along and it felt I might as well do it. And if it really sucks, then I can always go back, do the old stuff again. But at least I tried, and I wouldn't wonder. Advice I can give that, if you feel like that, just try it. I mean, what could go wrong, really? I mean, worst case, you tried something, you gained some new experiences, you met some more interesting people, and maybe you learned a bit about your own boundaries or desires, because sometimes you got to try a thing to really be able to tell. But I do admit I was incredibly lucky. All the stars aligned that there was this opening at Remedy. They trusted me and the skill I could sort of showcase to them with my portfolio, and then how I could sort of speak about what I intend to do, and allowed me to become part of their team and contribute to Control, which is this great sort of highly awarded game, and the following projects that we are now engaged in. But always worth a shot. Give it a go. If you feel like trying it, try it. If you feel like you want to apply somewhere, just do it. Worst case, they say yes. And then you actually have the problem that damn, now I'm going to get what I wanted and I have to deal with it. But I mean, that's kind of the whole thing, right? That's the whole point you asked for.
Johannes, we can't not talk about you without mentioning Houdini, because I know it's such a big piece of your toolkit and your day-to-day VFX work. So I wanted to ask about your time instructing courses for students over the years, how you've been able to utilize Houdini to create amazing visual effects. Can you share with me some of the possibilities real-time visual effects artists can benefit from adopting the tool, along with some of the big pitfalls that newer users may face in learning and executing the software?
God, that's going to be a long run. Get ready. I started when 2007, maybe I opened Houdini for the first time. And it's hard. And I'll start with the second half of your question. What is the pitfall? You open it and you're like, oh my God, what is that? Like, how do I even start? And why is everything so different? And how does that even work? And maybe it's actually slowly getting better because node-based systems are becoming more popular. So blueprints and all that kind of stuff, and everything's a shader graph these days. But sort of the idea of procedural platform and procedure generation is a steep learning curve. Or steep, actually, it's a shallow learning curve. You just do it for a long time and you feel like I know nothing. And I've been using Houdini for, 14 years now or something. And I feel I still know nothing. I never feel like, oh yeah, I'm fully accomplished. I know everything about this thing. And I guess the same thing you could get from Jeff Wagner, who is sort of the godfather of the Houdini showcasing, right? I don't know if you might have encountered him on a video somewhere or in a presentation. You never know the whole thing, but it shouldn't stop you, because if you have a certain goal you want to achieve, we'll go in and try to achieve that goal. There's plenty of material online. But proceduralism, and that's what Houdini as a platform, probably as the only platform I really know of, to be honest, to that extent, will solve a lot of the challenges that are coming up. When I mentioned Nanite before, like, this whole no more LOD, we can have like a bazillion triangles per pixel or something. This whole idea is like, who's going to model them? Who's going to make that detailed stuff? We're already looking at game projects having 2,500 people engaged. 25, 30 studios working on one project, and the budgets are going crazy. And of course, not everyone has $500 million in budget to make a game, right? So at some point, somehow we need to develop workflows and pipelines and sort of technology and processes that allow us to create high fidelity content that holds up to that scrutiny, but is still manageable by a handful of artists. Because and this is what proceduralism really gives you, this power. How we use it in Control, it is essentially procedural modeling. I mean, you explode a thing, you want to make it break into parts that kind of look nice as if the thing is broken into parts, and that's what you can use Houdini for example. And maybe the talk I sort of gave about this goes a little bit into detail how we did this, and it doesn't solve all the aspects for real time, but we are at the beginning of engaging. We are at Remedy, we are maybe more at the beginning than others. I know that Ubisoft and those places are probably facilitating it much more already, but everyone's picked up on that. So this is a great thing to learn, and it doesn't always mean just tech art. I feel animation and rigging is a big aspect, because games is like thousands of characters potentially, like all those, lots of different variations of people that need to be rigged, or enemies that need to be rigged, and rigged in a way that they're actually dynamic. So because stuff changes, it's games, stuff changes all the time. But stuff in film also changes all the time. But I mean, once you start rigging Hulk, you probably not, it's still going to be Hulk at the end of the film. They're not going to change his color or how he looks. Right? The game is sort of has to be a bit more agile. And if you then can easily switch things out, adapt things, I think that's where proceduralism is really powerful. And we haven't even dipped our toes into this. And I think the game approach often is quite general, like it's quite a generalist approach. And you open a tool and it's like, oh, well, where's the button to do the thing? Side effects from the Houdini side, I think they're really trying very hard to get into that. They're building those labs tools. And as like old Houdini users, you go like, really, you had to make this into a separate node or something like that, because you come in for like, oh yeah, that's the stuff we've built in the past yourself, because you're kind of so proud that you have to build everything yourself. But I think we need quicker stuff to come out for the game side, because people don't have the time to learn it for 15 years or for 10 years to be so savvy with it. But it will become more of that. We will have to have more people that are more skilled in those things, and maybe less skilled across other parts of where they're working at. So anyone these days, students looking at learning things, don't see it just as a film tool, don't see it just as a procedural modeler. You can do crazy funky stuff with on the animation side, on rig transfer things, on even just prototype Cody stuff. Of course, environment scattering of things, or like world building and all those. I'm not even being paid by them for saying all those things. But it feels to me like it's a very powerful tool. It has been incredibly powerful for what I'm doing, and I'm still using it every day for all kinds of things. So I can only encourage you to stick to it and maybe make this a bit your home, because that's where games is kind of going.
I agree with that sentiment. And I personally have been resistant on learning the tool, and for two reasons. Really, number one is because I'm much more interested in highly stylized hand-painted effects that Houdini has what I feel is limitations, because it's more geared toward proceduralism and repetitive techniques. But when you do hand painted things in Photoshop, you can really tap into those principles of shape language with like thin and thick lines. You can make an argument on either side. The other side I feel like I struggle with is just it costs a lot of money. And for the free version, you always got to deal with the watermarks. So
actually, that's not fully correct. I mean, I don't know what a lot of money is, but I think the indie version, $300 for 2 years.
For 2 years, $300.
I think, I don't know, something like that. It's not absurd. It used to be $5,000 for the master version or something absolute absurd.
Well, that's better than what Adobe Creative Suite is charging us right now. We got to do the monthly subscription. And as you know, one subscription by itself isn't bad, but when it turns into like 5 or 6, suddenly it's like half your paycheck every single month. Absolutely. And I think that's also a reason why they've got this indie thing now to allow the user base to adapt it more. And I mean, on the game side, then also they do this whole engine thing. So you can use Houdini inside Unreal now, or sort of you can tie it into Unreal. So you can make stuff in Houdini that then ends up in Unreal, and you sort of can live talk between the two tools and stuff. But you're right. It's not the solution for absolutely everything. I might be saying this every now and then, but of course you always need to find the right tool for the right job. And also what you're comfortable with. If you can create great art with pen and paper and a scanner, well, go at it, because in the end, it's hard enough to do the right creative expression. You don't want to then limit yourself to a tool someone suggests who doesn't actually know what you need to be doing. So in the end, totally the right thing to pick the thing that does it best for yourself. Yeah. What I would agree with is that having Houdini as a skill is going to make you that much more marketable in any studio you apply for. Studios want Houdini artists, or at least people who know how to use Houdini or understand it. Definitely +1 there, Johannes. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about higher ed. You did attend a couple schools for film, computer science, and a little bit of post-grad work in technical directing. Tell me a little bit about your time in college. I would love to hear about the highlights and the lowlights, what prompted you to go to school as opposed to self-teaching yourself the skill set, and maybe looking back, were the benefits justifying the costs that you paid to attend them?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Because if you look, I've been to quite a few universities doing all kinds of things because, the mosaic, right? Puzzle pieces. I needed more puzzle pieces. I wasn't sure what the picture's going to be. And, but I also have to caveat that a little. First academic degree in Germany is free. So I think you pay like $200 per semester to get a train ticket that you can, like a student train ticket or something. That's sort of what you pay. And then maybe student services. So people that make sure that, your student dorm doesn't burn down are being paid. But that's, you don't pay unhealthy sums of money for that level of education. So my first degree, computer science and multimedia, fell under this category. For me, it always was almost canonical. There was no doubt that I'm going to study something somewhere because that sort of, I always felt I need to learn more. I never felt that, I'm ready to take on the world. It was an amazing experience because you have so much more time to develop who you are, to experiment with random stuff, which of course means for a while terrible things like LAN parties, like stuff you do as computer science. So exciting. Computer science students, you start chiseling out a bit more what you want. And I minored in neurocomputing, which today is machine learning, right? So I did like how to make neural networks when, oh my God, it has 60 neurons. We don't know how to compute that kind of thing. Today, it's different, but I could dip into quite a few different aspects, and it gave me a foundation, like a solid. I learned some kind of base set of things that I can always fall back on, where I still harvest this these days. Having the chance to do it wasn't an exchange, but going to Australia for this year, the Edith Cowan University in Perth for my film and cinema studies. As absurd as it sounds, but one of the tuition fee was partially financed by the German government as part of a scholarship, because it's just how education works there, and you get part of the tuition fees, and you even get a bit of money to live, like some kind of aid, so you don't starve. And there was also a great opportunity, and in the end, I just got there by asking. I literally called it the Ranke Heinemann Institute. It's the European representation of all Australian and New Zealand universities in Europe, and I called them up. It's like, hey, I kind of want to study like sort of film stuff somewhere down under. And then, an hour later, I had like 3 options where I could go and who I need to call to get the sort of the governmental aid and stuff. So I was incredibly lucky that, being a German student at that time, that I could get all those benefits. And then after doing that degree and working as a programmer and finding that it's sort of the thrills and the exciting life of a software developer wasn't necessarily my cup of coffee. I wanted to go back to film school, that animation institute in Germany, and that sort of again was quite lucky because they had a technical directing degree that they offered as a postgrad. Same thing again, because it was a sort of a postgrad degree. It was free or pretty much free. It was like, again, 500 euros or something. It wasn't expensive by any means or by any American standard, I would say. They were just really hard to get into because they only took 4 students out of, 800 applicants. And I was really, really lucky to sort of be there. Somehow that worked. But I never regretted any of those steps. And I was at school for a really long time. But then with the financial burden, if I would think of, okay, that would have cost me so much, I don't know, I would have had to somehow make a different decision and not indulge myself in those experiences, which I'm so aware how incredibly lucky I am that I could have made them. And then I would have probably tried to, don't know if self-teaching is the right thing, but sort of at least try to get into jobs that teach me parts of the mosaic. It's like, maybe QA, that's, it is sort of this, maybe somehow get involved to talk to people that do the stuff I'm really interested in and then work my way through there. But it's difficult to say what I would have done if it wouldn't have been free or so affordable as it is.
What I'm hearing is I should go to school in Europe. You're not the first one to tell us about how awesome the education systems are in comparison to America, at least.
Yeah, but that's a very deep philosophical question, right? But I'm thoroughly of the opinion that the duty of a society is to educate its children, because everything else comes after that. That probably leads off the track of this podcast into another one.
Johannes, are you ready to get into the lightning round questions? Quick and easy.
Yes, because I did even write down answers for that. Yes.
Number 1, what is a perfect one-day getaway in Helsinki, Finland, and the surrounding area? Sorry if I mispronounced that.
A perfect one-day getaway, as executed on this very day, Bonfire Sausage Tent and Lake.
What is Bonfire Sausage Tent and Lake?
Tent and Lake. Literally going into the woods, making a fire, having a tent, eating the sausage, and looking at a lake. It is a very close to nature place. So you can do this any day if you want.
Nice. Did you go for a swim or did you catch some fish? Or
the temperature of the water is about 4 degrees. So no, I did not. And we tried the fishing and there was no fish because they're probably still hiding because the lake was still partially frozen. So they're probably hiding under the ice. Yeah.
What video game or app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
Good question. I have one. I don't know if it's the most fun, but I've had it across 3 generations of phones, which for me it's almost 12 years now because I don't change my phones that often. Well, it's a long time. I don't know how long. It's called Antioi. I don't know if I pronounced it right. It's like a weird little hexagon strategy game. I played for a while until it gets so hard that I'm really frustrated and annoyed. And then I let go for a year. And then I come back and I sort of play all the levels again until I hit the same point. But I've been doing this for a long time. Antioi, or like, Antiyoy. Great game.
What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
This is a question that is impossible to answer for a foodie like me. So I wrote carbonara.
Carbonara. That's a type of meat or pasta. I only know it from the Olive Garden.
That's pasta with some kind of bacon egg sauce. It's a white pasta and it's a parmesan on top and it's great. But it could also be some tandoori chicken, or it could be some. I mean, I'm anything. I was thinking like, what would I be able to eat every day of my life until I die? And I think carbonara would be the answer.
Yum, that does sound good. What is your favorite book or podcast you've listened to recently?
Can I do book and podcast? A book, one of my most favorite books ever is The 13.5 Lives of Captain Blue Bear, of a guy called Walter Mörs, who's a German, you'd say, comedian and writer. It's a really thick book about a fantasy realm called Zemonia and a blue bear who always sort of tells lies or changes stories a bit to make himself look a bit better. It's fantastic. It sounds like it's for children, but it kind of is not. And I found for its creativity, I loved it. Sorry, that's not really quick fire. And a podcast, Guilty Pleasure, oddly, I recently got into Critical Role because we did some road tripping through Finland because we couldn't travel anywhere else. And then we started listening to Critical Role. And yeah, I'm enjoying that a lot.
That's where there's a group of people who are role-playing a D&D game, right?
That is D&D. That's sort of, The Last of Us voice actors, and those guys are in there. Like very, very known voice actors are in it. And it's quite fun. I think they're all a bunch of friends and they just started recording themselves. And that's exactly what makes it so appealing to me. And I'm a nerd and I like D&D. So.
Favorite video game visual effect you're jealous of that isn't your own?
I would have loved to work on the new Dune the film that's coming out. And I'm jealous that I haven't. That would have been the one thing I would have said, I will stay in film if I would have had the chance to work on that. I don't even know why, but I like the book. I like the old film, like the Lynch one from the 80s. And that would have been a thing I would like, damn, I would have loved to work on that.
We saw it was coming out this year, so we went ahead and bought the whole volume of the books, and we're reading through them now before the film comes out.
It's an amazing story. Yeah,
it is. Best advice for a first-time visual effects artist or people looking to get into the industry?
Learn the fundamentals, even if it's hard.
What are you most excited about for the future of visual effects?
The increasing amazing accessibility that these days so many more people can do so many amazing things with stuff that they can practically get for free from the internet. The capabilities of new tech and hardware, when augmented reality, maybe not this generation, but maybe 2 generations of Google Glass down the road, finally have augmented reality in a way that you can play a board game on your living room table, where everything is hologram or something. It explodes when you start thinking about it. And I'm really, really excited about all that new tech and hardware and how easy it will be for everyone to partake in that. That's going to be great.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
I have no idea. I couldn't come up with something meaningful for that. Sorry, I'm going to blank on that one.
Okay. Any final thoughts or things you want to plug?
Things I want to plug. Well, I'm on Twitter only. I don't do ArtStation. And I do have all my stuff on entertainmentengineers.net, which is just sort of what I waffle about. And sometimes I write little tutorials about things, but I never do it as often as I would like to. And what else can I plug? Oh, yeah, I'm doing a CGMA course on Vex and Houdini. I think you can still sign up for the current one if you want to hear me waffle more on a weekly basis.
Rock on. We'll include a link in your bio in case people want to follow up on that. Johannes, man, it has been awesome being able to talk with you today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to today's episode with Johannes. He said a lot of really important things in this episode, and I encourage you to play it back and hear the episode again so you can catch some of those really important lessons he has to teach. I'm also seeing a trend where many film artists are moving into games and experiencing real-time visual effects for the first time, and it's super cool to see how our community is growing. Speaking of community, with the pandemic going on, so many of the awesome artists here with the real-time visual effects forums and Discord have been congregating in our voice channels and sharing their screen as we work together quietly, but together. In fact, one such artist had given me a paint over in the middle of some of my 2D FX work. So I want to encourage you guys to jump into our Discord for the real-time visual effects and join in the conversation. Share what you're working on and solicit feedback. People like Johannes, people like myself, always want to be there to share a second opinion and a fresh perspective on the amazing products you're working on. Until next time, rock on.